Hey everybody, don't look at my messy sewing room back there. I have been binge embroidering, if you can call that a thing. I think you can. Binge embroidering because my September perfectly pieced box from Me Time Delivered came, and let me spoil the surprise. The September blocks is this adorable little house block. How cute is this? And you can see here that I did the embroidery, the quilting on this one. And the fabrics that came in the Me Time Delivered box this month are just beautiful fabrics. So I haven't picked the threads off these yet, sorry. Here's a picture of the box and everything that came in it. And if you order now, this is the September 2022 box from Me Time Delivered. Stay with me. I'm going to turn my camera around and point it at my embroidery machine so that I can sew and quilt a little block with you. And so you can see that I already have one little block, a little greenhouse, already stitched out in this hoop. This is my 8x12 hoop on my Baby Lock Destiny. And you can see here that 2 of the 4-inch blocks easily fit in my 8x12 hoop. So I'm doing these little house blocks 2 at a time. So for the next block that I'm going to do in this hoop, I'm going to use this darling floral fabric that came in the Me Time Delivered box. I'm going to use this fabric for the house, and the little door is peach, and then like the other ones, the sky is this dark blue, or maybe that's the roof. I also have a piece of quilt batting cut in a 5-inch square, a little bit larger than I need, and I'll trim it down to size. So let's go ahead with the first embroidery step, which is a placement line for the batting. I love the little 2 and 4-inch blocks because it would be so hard to get perfectly pieced blocks if you were piecing the traditional way. So my second stitch line is just a little tack down stitch for my batting. This batting is some Warm and Natural. You can really use just about any batting for these quilt blocks. It's a great way to use batting that you have left over from your quilts. It stitches around the batting twice to make it extra secure. The only batting that I've had a little bit of trouble with is if I use wool batting, and that's because the wool batting, sometimes my presser foot can get caught in the fibers of the wool batting. So when I do that, I raise the presser foot. I have a setting on this machine where I can make the embroidery presser foot higher than normal, and so I do that for the wool batting, but I still have to watch it carefully. So now I'm just going to trim the batting. Of course, you can take your hoop out of the machine if you like. I'm going to do my best not to take the hoop out of the machine while I'm making this video. It might make things a tiny bit imperfect, but that's okay. I've never been a perfectionist. So there's my batting is trimmed, and now this next step is going to stitch the boundary of the block, and then it's going to stitch some lines for me, some placement lines for the next pieces of fabric. So while this stitches out, I'll just tell you a little bit about the Me Time Delivered embroidery boxes. The blocks come in 4 sizes, 2, 4, 6, and 8-inch blocks. And that really gives you a lot of choices of the size blocks you can do, the smaller blocks, you can do multiple blocks in the hoop. You can make a little project or a big project. I just love how many options you get. Okay, so for the first fabric piece, it's the little door. What's going to stitch now is a little placement line for the other side of the house, this little side next to the door. Now, they call this also a trimming line, but it's like 1/8 of an inch of fabric here, so I'm not going to bother trimming it. The only thing I would suggest is that if you're using this fabric, which came in the box, this fabric is directional. So I want to make sure that my little flowers here are going to be right side up. But I just put the fabric down along the placement line. Now since I'm making the 4-inch block project, I printed up the instructions for the 4-inch block project and I pre-cut all of my fabrics for the entire project. So that makes it fun for me to just sit down on my embroidery machine and embroider away. I especially love it for like a Sunday afternoon. I'll put on a nice old movie and hope that nobody bothers me for a few hours. So that is the placement line for the fabric on the other side of the door. And what I'm going to do is, again, make sure that I have my little flowers right side up, and I'll put this piece along the placement line. There are detailed instructions that actually come in the box, or if you don't order the Me-Time delivered box, the instructions are downloadable, and the instructions are very detailed and very well written, so every single step is explained. But once you do a block a couple of times, it's just easy to remember. So I like to just use my fingernail to finger press this down, and there's the bottom of the house. So the next step is going to just stitch these fabrics down, and it's also a placement line for the larger piece of the house up here. And once more, I'll make sure that my fabrics are right side up. The little flowers on my fabrics are right side up because they are directional. I'll place it like this. And here I'm just watching, since this line right here is the boundary edges of my block, I want to make sure that these edges of the fabric go that far. And the instructions gave me a good amount of fabric, so it's just fine. I get so impatient. I want to like do the next thing before my machine is finished. Okay, so I'm just going to finger press this little seam here. Oh, it's so darling. Of course, keep your fingers away from your embroidery needle. I am kind of dangerous that way. I like to smooth the fabric as it goes, and I have stitched my finger, unfortunately. Okay, so this one is a trimming line, and this is a trimming line that I'm actually paying attention to because that's a lot of fabric you gotta cut away. So now I'm gonna put on a little roof piece or sky piece. There we go, right along that placement line. See here, it showed me exactly where to put it. And the next line, we'll just stitch it down. I mean, seriously, this is the easiest way to make a quilt block. And since it already has the batting, and the last step is the quilting, and you're gonna love the quilting on this block. It gives such detail to the house. Okay, so since the last stitch step is the quilting, you're practically doing quilt as you go, and once you sew all your blocks together, they're quilted. Or you don't have to do the last step, you don't have to do the quilting, and then you can sew the blocks together and quilt. There goes Siri. Take off my watch. Okay, so now I'm gonna trim here. It would be a little easier for me to take this out of my embroidery machine to trim, but I'm not going to. And you notice that I have these great double curved embroidery scissors. These are amazing for cutting trimming pieces in your blocks and also for trimming applique. I love those. I will put a link in the blog post where you can get those, but they're just Ginger. I love the Ginger brand. They're sharper than the other ones that I've purchased, and I really can't do embroidery without them. Out of all of the Me-Time delivered little embroidered blocks that I've done so far, and this is the third one, but out of all of them, I think this is the fastest one. So now the block is just about done, and this step is going to go around the outside boundary of the block, and so it'll be a cutting line. It includes the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when you trim this block, you can trim right around this little line and it will give you a 4.5 inch block. So it includes a seam allowance for when you sew them together. And there's actually a line on the back of the block to show you your seam allowance. So now you could stop here and you would have unquilted blocks, but there are 2 more steps and I really like them. So this step is a doorknob. Isn't that adorable? So here we're gonna add a little doorknob to our door. And then the last step, like I said, is the embroidery, and it just adds such detail to the house. So let's go ahead and do that. Now keep in mind that you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance past this line here. So you might say, oh, the details on the house don't go all the way to the edge. Well, once you sew them with the seam allowance, everything will look perfect. It's just so cute. I really love how this time the quilting gives detail to the house. And really this is something that is hard to do with the regular sewing machine when you're quilting. You could do this, you could do ruler quilting and add details to your house blocks, but it's just so much easier on your embroidery machine. Look at that, isn't that adorable? And then in the top little pieces, which I haven't decided if it's sky or roof yet, but in these top little pieces it adds little clouds. Now, just so you know, this beautiful blue color is the color of thread that came in the Me Time Delivered box for September. And it's glide thread. I love glide thread. Glide thread works perfectly on all of my sewing machines. And it's just a little bit of a sheen. So I love it for quilting. I love it for embroidery. And we are almost done. Oh my gosh, I forgot to do the quilting on this block. But since I have not unhooped it, I can just go backwards in the steps here. You're gonna hear my machine beeping and going backwards through the steps here, or forwards through the steps because I already did them. And so on this step, I did the doorknob, and now here is the quilting step. So let's watch that quilting again. And my thread is shredding a little bit, so I'm just gonna cut it. There we go. And there we go. Since I didn't unhoop it, it was a mistake on my part. I skipped that step. I got ahead of myself and I really wanted to show you this part. So I skipped that step, but it's no big deal. I hadn't unhooped it yet, and I can just go ahead and skip ahead on my embroidery machine till I was at the right place and then run this step for you. Doesn't that blue thread look great on the green too? The thread they sent really looks great with all of the fabric that came in the kit, and it really is great on the, I love these little clouds. It's just perfect. So I'm gonna go back to my embroidery binging because I have about half of my blocks done for the 4-inch block project, which is an 18 by 18 inch mini quilt, or maybe I'll turn it into a pillow. We'll see. You know, I never know exactly what I'm gonna do with it until I'm finished. So thanks so much for tuning in for another perfectly pieced box. I'm so glad I can show you how I'm doing these. Please like this video so more people will see it, and I'll see you next time.